Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tracing the deep, incredibly fascinating historical roots of the holy day of Ashura. We'll be exploring its very divergent observances across the Islamic world, and then we're going to dive into a unique decision-making process known as Shura. It's a journey that spans ancient traditions, a pivotal desert battle, global cultural evolution, and the foundations of consensus. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. 1. The origins of Ashura. 2. The Battle of Karbala. 3. Shia mourning and rituals. 4. The history of commemoration. And 5. Shura, Islamic decision-making. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1. The origins of Ashura. To really grasp the weight of this day, we first need to look at what the word itself actually means, where it falls on the calendar, and the ancient context surrounding it. So Ashura literally translates to the 10th. It refers specifically to the 10th day of Muharram, which is the very first month in the Islamic lunar calendar. Historically, this was a month where warfare was strictly prohibited. But what's really fascinating here is that the significance of this specific day predates Islam entirely. Historical texts actually show that Arabs from the Quraysh tribe used to fast on this very day during the pre-Islamic era, which is a practice believed to be a remnant from the teachings of the Prophet Abraham. And this historical precedence carried right over into the Islamic era. When the Prophet Muhammad arrived in Medina, he observed Jewish communities fasting to coincide with Passover. He told his companions, "You Muslims have more right to celebrate Moses' victory than they have," and he ordered a fast on this day. The sources note that this day marks some pretty profound moments of salvation in history. Specifically, the day Noah safely left the ark and the day Moses was saved from the Pharaoh of Egypt, so it really established a strong foundation of thanksgiving. And this brings us to a really profound thematic contrast that we see today. For Sunni Muslims, Ashura is often observed as a day of voluntary fasting. It's a joyous occasion of thanksgiving for the salvation of prophets like Moses and Noah. But for Shia Muslims, the 10th of Muharram took on an entirely different, incredibly solemn meaning after the year 680 AD. For the Shia community, it is a major religious festival marked by intense grief and mourning for the martyrdom of Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Which leads us to Section 2, the Battle of Karbala. Let's focus on the exact historical event that forever altered the meaning of Ashura for the Shia community. The date is the 10th of Muharram in the Islamic year 61 AH, which corresponds to October 10th, 680 CE. On this exact date, the Battle of Karbala took place in the desert en route to the city of Kufa. This single, devastating event served as the ultimate climax that essentially crystallized the Shia identity into a distinct sect. The tragedy unfolded in a really brutal sequence. First, Hussein categorically refused to pledge his allegiance to the Umayyad Caliph Yazid, whom historical accounts often portray as corrupt and oppressive. Because of this refusal, his small retinue of male relatives and family was intercepted in the harsh desert of Karbala. They were surrounded by a massive army and, devastatingly, cut off from the drinking water of the nearby Euphrates River for days. Ultimately, Hussein and his companions were slaughtered. The surviving women and children were taken prisoner and marched all the way to Damascus. This sequence of events transformed a political standoff into what is viewed in Shiism as the absolute, ultimate, preordained sacrifice against tyranny. Just listen to this powerful quote from Hussein ibn Ali. It perfectly captures what's known as the Karbala paradigm. Facing a vastly superior army and certain death, Hussein chose to stand his ground. In the Shia view, this symbolizes the eternal struggle between good and evil, the absolute pinnacle of self-sacrifice, and an awakening of the Muslim community to moral depravity. It set the entire moral foundation for the centuries of mourning that followed. Section 3, Shia mourning and rituals. With that heavy historical context established, let's examine how this deep sorrow is culturally expressed today. These expressions of grief take several different forms, often happening inside dedicated gathering spaces known as Husainiyas. You have latm, which is a mild flagellation involving rhythmic chest beating while chanting elegies, a practice deeply rooted in ancient Arab mourning traditions. Then there are tazia. These are elaborate passion plays acting out dramatic theatrical reenactments of the Karbala narratives, which are hugely popular in places like Iran. And finally, you have massive public processions, where people carry symbolic objects like the alam flags representing Hussein's ensign, or replicas of his bier made out of date palms. Now, stepping back to look at this impartially, there are very varied approaches to these rituals. Some participants engage in extreme self-flagellation, known as tatbir, using swords or chains with razor blades, essentially to physically share in the pain Hussein suffered. However, many Shia clerics heavily condemn this practice, arguing that self-harm is strictly forbidden in Islam and actually renders the body impure for prayer. In response, regions like Iran and political groups like Hezbollah and Lebanon have outlawed the bloody practices. Instead, they endorse and organize massive blood donation drives as an alternative way to demonstrate that willingness for self-sacrifice. Section 4. The History of Commemoration. So, we have to ask, how did a clandestine mourning practice by female survivors, like Hussein's sister Zainab, grow into massive, state-sponsored passion plays? It's honestly an incredible story of cultural survival and transformation. Right after the battle in the 680s, the Umayyads actively suppressed the memory of Karbala, which forced the mourning into small, private, and very risky gatherings. By the 750s, the Abbasids initially promoted these Karbala narratives to help overthrow the Umayyads, but then they later viewed the Shia as a political threat and clamped down hard, even going so far as to demolish Hussein's shrine. The real turning point didn't happen until 963 CE under the Shia Buyid dynasty, who organized the very first public street processions in Baghdad. Finally, in the 1500s, the Safavid dynasty took over Iran, converting it to Twelver Shi'ism, and officially formalized these mourning practices into elaborate state-sponsored rituals. But the culture didn't just stop in the Middle East. Its reach expanded globally. It spread to South Asia, partially via the Timurid and Mughal empires. Later on, Shia rulers in regions like Awad heavily sponsored beautiful Urdu elegy poetry just to recount the tragedy. Dedicated mourning buildings called imambaras popped up all across South Asia. And, astonishingly, the practice even crossed oceans. In the 19th century, Indian immigrants brought these rituals to the Caribbean, where they evolved into the Jose commemorations in Trinidad. It perfectly showcases the incredible adaptability of these historical narratives as they integrate with local customs all over the world. Section 5. Shura, Islamic Decision-Making. Finally, let's pivot from the historical tragedy and mourning of Ashura to a distinct yet highly significant political and cultural concept in the Islamic world, shura. Shura is an Arabic word directly rooted in the concept of seeking counsel. But there's a really beautiful etymological hook here that I just love. The root word also translates to extracting honey. I mean, comparing the act of seeking advice to extracting honey is such a brilliant metaphor. It highlights the immense value placed on wise consultation, essentially treating good advice as one of the most sought-after and nourishing substances in nature. Now, this concept, which is directly referenced in the Quran as the way Muslims should conduct their affairs, differs pretty greatly from what we might typically see in Western democratic systems. While Western democracy often relies on a strict majority rules basis, where minority views can sometimes be completely overridden, Shura strives for a true common consensus. The goal of Shura is to continuously negotiate and make trade-offs so that those minority views are actively incorporated. Ideally, a decision is only reached when everyone can walk away with at least some of their needs met. Understanding this framework isn't just theory, it's highly practical. Shura is applied at absolutely every level of society in many Gulf countries today. We're talking from families organizing their homes, all the way up to sheikhs making top-level governmental decisions. It inherently broadens the input of expertise and foresight. For anyone looking to navigate diplomacy or international business in the Middle East today, recognizing that final settlements require this continuous, consensus-building shura process is absolutely critical. Well, we've covered a vast sweep of history today, from the pre-Islamic fasting of the Quraysh through the deeply defining tragedy of Karbala, all the way to the globally adapted rituals of Ashura, and finally, the consensus-driven model of Shura. As you reflect on the deep historical roots and continuous evolution of the Islamic culture we've explored today, I want to leave you with this thought. How might the deliberate extraction of wisdom through Shura be applied to build consensus and actually bridge divides in our modern world today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.